It's been said we stand on the shoulders of others when we take a lot of credit, and I want to talk about people that aren't here that I really got a lot from. The first one I met was a fellow by the name of William H. Clark, Bill Clark. He had an NSS number of something like 1618, something like that. He'd been around a bit. He was a graduate student for a PhD in physics at the university when I met him. I met him was at the Youth Alpine Club, and everybody just at the Youth Alpine Club, very young, just been formed, and they all sat around. Well, what do we do? What do we do? And Bill Clark says, well, let's go caving. Many of you know this, that my uncle was Burl Manuel, who was credited with more or less the rediscovery of Timpanogos Cave, and I sort of grew up with that story. And I thought, well, this would be interesting, and so I went to Grotto meetings, which Grotto meeting, but they decided, let's go to this cave that none of them have been before, called Garner Cave. And that was April 23rd, 1956. So I went to Garner Cave, and that started my caving. I was hooked. The next person was, of course, William H. Halliday, Doc Halliday. He had organized the grotto. We'd been away in the Navy, some obligation he had in order to get his degree, and he came back to the LDS hospital to finish out his residency or something, and he was my mentor for years and years and years after. I communicated with him once or twice a week, sometimes for years, and that drifted away. Of course, I went back to graduate school and college and stopped caving a bit, but we still communicate. He's a very good friend. I've known him now starting in January 1957. It'll be 50 years. And he's one of the most prominent, well-known people in the NSS. But he has been literally my mentor all these years, and I really have to thank him. And along the way, other people have really been important to me. And I'm going to forget a lot of names, but I have to thank Earl especially. Earl came out on everything. And if you went on a trip, very often you went in that yellow international carry-all, and that thing just went and went and went. I have to tell this story that Jim Peck told. It was Jim Peck's grandmother that told this joke to Jim, and Jim put it in the newsletter. Seems Earl was on his deathbed, and his family asked, what kind of casket do you want to be buried in? And Earl says, I don't want a casket, I want to be buried in my carry-all. And his family asked, well, why is that? And he says, well, I think it pulled me out of every hole that I've ever been in. So, I think I've told that right. You remember it? Yeah. How many miles did you have on that when I was retired?
When it was retired?
Yeah.
About 530.
530,000 miles. So, what a caving trip. But Earl has been the mainstay. Never could have done what we did in Big Brush Creek Cave. Getting down all the way down to the bottom of the Dead Air Passage was one of the most difficult things that I have ever done. If you ever want to know what it feels like to be dying and have to get out of a cave before you do, that's a good trip, is the Dead Air Passage. And we did it, and people say, well, we measured the carbon dioxide and the oxygen content, and you should be dead because you can't do what you guys did. But it happened, And Earl had been a mainstay for I don't know how many mapping trips. I always enjoyed mapping with Earl, especially when he was tape, because he had an analytical mind, and you didn't have to tell him where to place a station, and he could do the most clever things to shorten the number of stations you had to take. And Steve Olson was a mainstay for years and years and years for everything I did. Of course, it helped that I hired him as an engineer, so we could get together quite a bit. There's nothing that I can take full credit for. I had to have the help of others. Anyway, this lady showed up at my door, claimed that she knew me. And in fact, she started talking about a lot of things that we were supposed to have done together. And I, you know, for 30 years with the Wasatch Mountain Club, I led Thursday night hikes, sometimes with 100 people, and I can't remember everybody. I thought, well, for sure, that's got to be what it is, because she reminded me of this. And it was sort of chilly, but she said, boy, it's hot in this coat. So she took her coat off, and well, still hot. And then she took this, I guess you call it a chemise off, and here she was standing there in the cold with a very low-cut evening dress on. And she was well endowed, too. I don't know what to think, you know, you're in that situation, there's a lot of things you can look at, but I just sort of made my choice. I don't know if she noticed it or not. I'm just going to show up in the video.